Hey, Writing Pursuits authors, welcome back to the show. To those of you who are new, I want to extend a special welcome. My name is Kathrese McKee, and I'm glad you're here. Today, in part 4 of this world building series, we'll be discussing everything from transportation and communication to architecture, construction, and technology that goes into creating a believable, immersive world. Fasten your seatbelts, hold on tight, and let's explore the wheels of progress and learn how to shape our own world. I called this episode Wheels of Progress, an umbrella term for things like transportation, communication, construction and architecture, technology, and medical knowledge. I would love to know your favorite books and movies where these topics played a pivotal role. Share your favorites in the comments. Let's get to it. World building is a huge topic, so much so that I've broken it into 6 parts. You cannot overestimate the importance of world building in creating a believable and immersive fictional world. Even if you're writing historical or contemporary fiction, you still need a handle on all the topic I am discussing in this series. So far, we have discussed building believable worlds and why it matters. Nature's realm set the stage. Society's rules bend them, break them. Today is Wheels of Progress, shape your world. And then in the coming weeks, we will talk about past and present, explore history's legacy, and magic, myth, and man wield supernatural power. And I'm really looking forward to those. It's difficult to choose which piece of Wheels of Progress to cover first, but since I brought up wheels in the title, let's start with transportation. Here are some questions to ask yourself when you're in the midst of world building. What mode of transportations or what modes of transportation are available in your world? For example, if it's an ice world, how do the people or the beings, whatever they might be, your main characters, how do they get around in order to find food and trade amongst themselves? Have the civilizations in your series or book developed technologies for flight or underwater transportation? How do they manufacture their transportation? Do your characters rely on beasts of burden, mechanical means of transportation, global navigation, or is everyone on foot? Are there modes of transportation only available to the very wealthy, like, say, yacht? Is there ubiquitous public transportation that will take a citizen almost anywhere? Is there like public transportation everywhere? What are the limitations and advantages of each mode of transportation in your world? How affordable is it for the average person? Are there any unique modes of transportation that exist only in your world? So your imagination is the limit here. How long does it take to travel between different locations in your world? So sometimes I've seen stories where it seems improbable that they could have covered the distance in the amount of time, that was allotted by the author. So pay attention to realistic distances. How safe is the transportation in this world? Not everything is always safe, no matter how you're getting there. But I mean, if you're traveling by dinosaur, aren't you taking the chance that you're going to get eaten? That's just, throwing it out there. Are there any transportation related conflicts or tensions between different groups in this world? And how does transportation impact the economy and the politics of your world? Finally, how does transportation impact the environment of your world? So these are all questions you might ask yourself that are about transportation. And the next thing I wanted to talk about was communication. One measure of civilization's sophistication is its means of communication. Like on Earth, some of these systems have been lost in the midst of antiquity. However, there are many examples of ancient systems of keeping records and preserving history, including cave paintings, clay tablet, papyrus, hieroglyphics, and wall carvings to celebrate a monarch's prowess in battle. All these things have come down to us through history, but don't think that those are not available to you in your book. On Earth, there are a few events we can point to that shook our world and our means of communication. Number one was the printing press, invented in the mid-15th century by Johannes Gutenberg, and it allowed for the mass production of written materials and helped spread knowledge and ideas across Europe and the rest of the world. The telegraph was invented in the 18th century, and it allowed for rapid communication across long distances and helped connect people around the world. So that was another big jump in communications. Another example is the internet, developed in the late 20th century, which transformed communication, commerce, and access to information on a global scale. It also opened up a can of worms, but there you are. So questions you might ask yourself when you're building your fictional world's communication systems are, what forms of communication exist in this world? And remember, there's nonverbal and verbal, so keep that open, something to think about. How reliable are these forms of communication? Is there censorship or surveillance? Is there information that is off limits or top secret? Are there any unique forms of communication that exist only in your world? And how easy is it to access different forms of communication? And I should have said, how easy is it to access different forms of communication? How do different groups within your world use communication to achieve their goals? Are there any communication-related conflicts or tensions between different groups in this world? Just think about the slang between different groups of people and how sometimes that's a barrier to communication. I mean, they say English is a common language that divides two people when we're talking about British English and American English. So you can definitely make plot points and cause conflict through this misunderstandings that are caused by language. How does communication impact the economy or the politics of the world? And how does communication impact the culture and social norms? So those are some general questions. There's so many more that we could come up with, but that's to get you started. After climate and flora and fauna, as we discussed in part 2, right up here. In this series, it was called Nature's Realm, about your physical world. The next thing you're likely to think about is shelter for your characters. And that leads us to architecture and construction methods. Architecture depends on culture, know-how, and engineering, available materials, and mechanical advantage. That is, machinery and manpower to build shelters and other structures like palaces and government buildings, places of worship, and public spaces. If you are building your own world, be sure to consider our world history to find ideas of amazing architecture we no longer use, like the cliff dwellings of the Anasazi of the Four Corners area in the American Southwest, or Machu Picchu in the Andes Mountains, a true marvel of engineering. That thing had amazing water handling systems and drainage built in from the ground up. Look into the terraced gardens in Ethiopia and the floating gardens of the Aztecs called chinampas. So there's all kinds of things you can go back and use for your fiction, especially if you're writing fantasy or science fiction. Okay, this is a special favor to me. Please consider making your fantasy settings less Eurocentric. Can I say that? There are other continents to choose from. Western culture may be all you know, but Eastern culture is at least as rich. Be open to some new ideas for your settings and your world building. Also, if you set your stories and series in space, you've got all kinds of consideration. And that's pretty much why I don't write hard science fiction. It's like too much engineering. So questions authors might ask when they're building a fictional world's architecture and construction, and they're thinking about how things are built, is what are the materials that are available for construction in your world? What is the technology level in your world? And how does that impact the construction method? Do the people work with natural materials like metal, stone, wood, sand, clay, or plant fibers, or animal pelts? Or do they create synthetic fabrics and materials? Do they farm on open plains, terraced gardens, or in hydroponic greenhouses? So those are, you lead into architecture there. What are the architectural styles and traditions in your world? Are there any unique construction methods that exist only in your world? Also, how does the environment impact construction? Because the chief reason for having buildings is shelter, right? And places to meet. But shelter comes first. So you have to think about the environment. Are there any cultural or social factors that impact construction in your world? Are there any construction related conflicts or tensions between different groups? And how does it impact culture and social norms? Also, do beliefs, especially spiritual ones, inspire societies to build certain kinds of architecture? And is land available for purchase, or is it all owned by the government or the crown or the church? Those are things to ask yourself when you're thinking about architecture and construction. Technology is the next consideration, and it impacts everything else, of course. So I could have done it first. A character may be able to imagine an invention, like Michelangelo imagining the helicopter. But if the world doesn't have a technology to execute the idea, then, pardon the pun, they can't get off the ground. So questions authors need to consider when building a fictional world's technological advancements is, do they have the will? Are they literate enough as a society to pass on knowledge through writing in written form? How much math does the average citizen know? What sources of power do they have? Are they an analog society or a digital society? Or are they something else that we haven't imagined yet? What state has their civilization reached in manufacturing? Do they build everything one at a time by hand? Or do they mass produce items in highly specialized industries? How do they farm, build, wage war? How does technology impact the economy and politics? Are there any unique technological advances that exist only in your world? How easy is it to access and use different technologies? And are there any cultural, backward to this question, are there any cultural or social factors that hold back technological development? And how do different groups within this world use technology to achieve their goals? Are there any conflicts or tensions you can build from the differences between groups in your world related to technology? So we had an example of this when we started seeing industry in northern England, and we had a bunch of people that didn't want to have that industry there, and then we called them the Luddites. So just think about that. There are examples from our past where people are resistant to progress, and sometimes progress has its own cost. Okay, so finally, there are many topics that I could fit inside the topic of wills of progress. The last topic I'm raising in this episode is medical knowledge. So your characters likely will be threatened by diseases and illnesses and injuries. So the state of medical knowledge, the expertise in care and the availability of that care could provide lots of drama and tension to your plot. So questions authors need to consider about the state of medical knowledge are like these. What is the general level of medical knowledge in your world? Is it kind of basic? Is it advanced? Or somewhere in between? For the longest time, doctors on Earth ignored and were hostile to the idea of hand washing as a basic sanitary practice. And who knows how many people died as a result. So for ages, the idea of germs was unknown. Even now, though we know to wash our hands and brush our teeth, people sometimes don't. And that goes for a lot of other medical advice. So are there any cultural or societal taboos around medical practices or procedure? What common illnesses or diseases exist in your world, and what are their symptoms and treatment? What technologies and treatments are available in your world, and how accessible are they to different people and segments of society? Are there any medical professions, such as doctors or healers, and what training or education do they have? Are there any alternative or complementary medical practice like herbalism or acupuncture? And how does the availability and quality of healthcare affect different communities within your world? Are there any major medical breakthroughs or discoveries happening in your world? And how do they impact society and individuals? How does the understanding and treatment of mental health differ from the present day? And what kinds of mental health conditions exist in your world? And don't forget about magic and supernatural healing if you're writing fantasy fiction. So you can see that medical knowledge is has a wealth of possibilities for creating tension and plot point and exploring themes. Today, we have discussed the wheels of progress and how they shape your world building for fiction, including transportation, communication, construction and architecture, technology, and medical knowledge, and how these considerations can lead to conflict in your stories and plot points and themes. Of course, I could never think of everything, but this is a good starting place for building a believable and immersive fictional world to entrance your readers. I would love to know your favorite books and movies where these topics play a pivotal role. Share your favorites in the comments. That's all I have for today. Until next time, keep writing, my friends. Keep writing.